Everyone has their own image of what Santa Claus looks like. I still remember when I was little, my whole family moved to the United States. That first Christmas holiday after we arrived, I actually saw Santa Claus. My English wasn't very good yet, but I had made some local friends who were willing to communicate with me through gestures. That day, after saying goodbye to my parents, I rode my bicycle to a friend's house to play. Mother reminded me that it was Christmas Eve and I had to be home before dinner. I played board games with my friends for a while until I smelled their mother cooking and realized it was time to head back. I said goodbye to my friend's whole family and their relatives, then hopped on my bike and rode home. When I got back, I saw that my father's car was in the driveway. It looked like my parents and my sister had gone out and weren't back yet. So I walked alone into the backyard and sat on the long bench beside the back door, staring up at the sky and waiting for my family to return. Our backyard had a wire gate in the fence. It wasn't locked, just held by a simple latch, and beyond the gate lay a small forest. During the day, neighbors often walked their dogs there, and I used to play in the woods with my sister. At night, although a few path lights glowed dimly among the trees, the forest still felt very dark. That's why I never went in after dark. It always seemed a little dangerous. I was sitting there gazing at the stars when suddenly I heard heavy footsteps coming from the woods outside the backyard. It sounded as if someone was walking through the dim trees, dragging something along the ground. I stared fixedly at the forest beyond the wire gate. Then, all at once, a huge figure emerged from the bushes. Under the glow of the path light beside the gate, I widened my eyes and looked closely. It was a person dressed in red, dragging a large burlap sack behind him. For a small child like me, the first reaction was pure excitement. I shouted loudly, "It's Santa Claus!" The Santa Claus figure turned his head and looked toward me. Then, through the wire gate, he asked in a low voice, "Did you see everything?" I just stared at him, speechless. Santa tilted his head, studying me, as if an idea had come to him. He quickly set down the huge sack, walked up to the gate, and tried to open it and come inside. But the day before, my father had installed a new chain lock on the gate that used to be unlocked, so he cowled and get in. Unable to open it, he tried to climb over the top with clumsy movements. Just as he was about to make it over the gate, the sound of a car pulling into our front driveway echoed from the front yard. He froze, then quickly jumped back down to the ground outside. Looking at me through the wire gate, he gave a slight smile, made a hush gesture with his finger, picked up his sack, and disappeared into the dark woods. That evening at dinner, I excitedly told my family that I had seen Santa Claus. They all smiled and said it must have been my imagination. But I remembered the scene so clearly that I was sure it wasn't a fantasy. For a long time afterward, little me believed without any doubt that it really had been Santa Claus. Only when I grew up and thought back on it, did I realize what a bonetless, chilling figure he had been. I remembered the ferocious expression on his face as he tried to open the gate, his eyes bloodshot. His bright red clothes gleamed under the path light, shining with a fresh, vivid red, as if the color had just been dyed on. Even more terrifying was the huge sack that looked like it was full of gifts. When he set it on the ground, I noticed it was twitching and rustling. Something inside was making strange, muffled sounds, like cries trying to escape. I didn't know what was really in that sack, but a few Christmases ago, I returned to the small town where we used to live. As I walked down the familiar streets, I still saw the missing persons flyers that had been there since I was a child. Looking at those posters, I remembered the Santa Claus I met that night and the writhing thing inside his sack. A wave of fear washed over me, raising goosebumps all over my body and sending a chill down my spine. This eerie incident happened right near my house. Because there was a university nearby, there were many rental apartments around us. One of them stood diagonally across to the right front of our home. This happened about 2 years ago. It was around 5 in the afternoon. On my way home from school, I passed that apartment building and happened to look up. I suddenly noticed that the corner room on the second floor closest to our house had its window and curtains wide open. with the lights on inside. From where I stood, I could see clearly into the room. I looked more carefully out of curiosity. Through the window I could see the ceiling, and I wondered why there was a rope tied up there, with what looked like something hanging from it. I thought, no way, and shifted to several different angles to get a better look. Sure enough, a rope was clearly visible, and below it hung something that resembled a human head. I ran home immediately and told my father, who had already returned. I asked him to come back with me to check, in case I had seen it wrong. We went outside and looked again. It really was a hanging suicide. We called the police right away. While waiting in front of our house, the police cars and ambulance soon arrived. Then two police officers walked up to us and confirmed what we had seen. One of them looked from outside and said, "Yes, I see it." He and the paramedics then entered the apartment together. Soon afterward, a van pulled up in front of the building. A man who looked like the landlord got out and went inside. From where we stood, we could see that the police had already gone into the room. They quickly closed the windows and drew the curtains, so nothing inside was visible anymore. My father and I waited out front. About 15 minutes later, the police, the landlord, and the emergency personnel came out, all of them looking shaken. The man who seemed to be the landlord kept apologizing to one of the officers, while the ambulance simply drove away. The policeman who had spoken with us earlier noticed us and walked over. "Sir, thank you for your trouble," he said to my father. "We're sorry you were worried. Actually, there was no suicide inside." My father replied, "Really? So we misunderstood?" The officer nodded. "It's understandable you thought it was a suicide when you saw that. The room is actually empty, but there really was something hanging there. It was just a very detailed mannequin. The landlord had hung it up himself, and the mannequin was covered with talismans and charms." I was stunned. I asked the officer, why would the landlord do something like that? The two policemen exchanged glances. Then the older one spoke. "The landlord said today is the day the ghost appears, so before the ghost could show up, he hung the mannequin there first." My father and I were completely bewildered, our heads full of question marks. The officer looked equally puzzled as he continued explaining. "Today is the anniversary of the death of someone who committed suicide in that room years ago. The landlord claims that every year on this exact day, the ghost returns. That's why he hung the mannequin in advance. He believes it will keep the spirit away." Only after hearing the officer's explanation did we finally understand the eerie scene we had witnessed that day. 2 years later, the landlord sold the entire apartment building and moved in with his daughter in another county. The building has since been converted into a convenience store. This terrifying experience happened 2 years ago in the apartment where I used to live. I was staying on the top floor of a 6-story building. The view was great, and it was close to the station. Because I lived on the 6th floor, I always took the elevator, which had glass doors so you could see the hallway on every level as you passed. That day, I came home from work as usual and rode the elevator up to the 6th floor. When it passed the 3rd floor, I noticed a woman standing with her back to me in front of one of the apartment doors not far from the elevator. I thought she must be someone the tenant knew and didn't pay much attention, then continued home. The next day, when I returned from work and took the elevator up again, I saw her once more standing in the same spot in front of that door on the 3rd floor. I thought, "Shess here again. Why does she keep waiting outside?" It seemed strange, but I checked my watch and saw it was almost midnight, although I found the woman odd. Once I got home, I forgot about it. The following day was Friday, so I had drinks with my colleagues and didn't get back until after 1 in the morning. As usual, I took the elevator from the 1st floor. I meant to press the button for the 6th floor, but because I was a little drunk, I accidentally hit the 5th floor instead. Feeling foolish for the mistake, I decided to walk up the stairs from the 5th floor to sober up. Inside the elevator, I was humming cheerfully, but the moment it passed the 3rd floor, my drunken haze vanished instantly. The woman was there again, standing in front of the same door. Just as the elevator continued upward, she slowly began to turn around. I didn't clearly see her face, but it was obvious she had spotted me inside the elevator. For some reason, I felt danger instinctively. As soon as the doors opened on the 5th floor, I held my breath and quietly slipped toward the stairs. While climbing, I heard the elevator descending. It stopped on the 3rd floor, then started coming back up. My heart began pounding. I hurried faster toward the 6th floor. When I reached the 6th floor, I saw the elevator had stopped on the 5th. From the stairwell, I could hear footsteps pacing back and forth on the 5th floor. It sounded like the woman was searching for me. The situation felt terrible. Terrified of being found, I stayed completely silent and carefully made my way back to my room. The moment I stepped inside, I quietly locked the door and finally breathed a sigh of relief. I sat by the door thinking, why did she follow me upstairs? Is she a stalker? Or someone mentally unstable? What would happen if she found me? I thought for a while but cowed and reached any conclusion. Still, given the circumstances, I decided I should tell the property agent. After explaining the situation over the phone, we agreed to observe for a little longer. The next morning, when I went downstairs, I didn't see that woman again, although I had no idea what time she usually appeared at night or how long she stayed in the building. I had seriously considered that if I saw her once more, I might need to call the police. The fear she caused had left me thoroughly annoyed, and my terror had gradually turned into anger. So I made up my mind if I saw that woman again over the weekend, I would confront her directly, point out her behavior, and complain. But that woman didn't appear all weekend. By Monday, I had worked very late and only got home on the last train. My mind was filled with work matters, and by the time I reached the apartment building, I had completely forgotten about the woman. The moment I stepped into the elevator, however, the thought of her suddenly came back to me. As the elevator passed the 3rd floor, I noticed there was no one there at all. Had that strange woman finally given up? Because I hadn't encountered the eerie woman again, my mood lifted right away. But I was still too naive. When the elevator reached the 5th floor, I was terrified. There she was, standing right in front of apartment 502. I could hardly believe my eyes and froze in place. Just as the elevator was about to pass the 5th floor, I saw the woman suddenly turn her head quickly toward the elevator. Although I still couldn't see her face, it was over. She now knew I lived on the 6th floor. I was extremely tense and frightened. When the elevator doors opened on the 6th floor, I frantically pressed the button for the 1st floor and the closed floor and the closed door button, then rode straight back down. As the elevator passed the 5th floor, I breathed a sigh of relief because it didn't stop there, and the woman was no longer in sight. Just as I had expected, or rather, just as I had feared, she must have gone up the stairs toward the 6th floor. Once I reached the 1st floor, I stayed close to the building wall so I wouldn't be noticed and moved to a spot where I could see the staircase. From there, I saw the woman pacing back and forth in the corridor on the 6th floor. I thought it would be best not to have any contact with such a disturbed woman. But what should I do now? Call a friend to come over? Or call the police? After thinking for a moment and looking up again, the woman had already disappeared. Where had she gone? Was she hiding somewhere? Or had she decided to leave? If she was going to leave, she would have to exit through the main entrance of the building, so I would definitely see her from here. I stood in the corner and waited for about 30 minutes, but there was no movement at the entrance. Finally, I decided to go back to my room and check. I walked up the stairs as quietly as possible. Every time I reached a new floor, my heart pounded with fear that she might suddenly appear and attack me. When I finally made it to the 6th floor without seeing any sign of the woman, I let out a deep breath. She must have slipped away somewhere while I wasn't paying attention. Completely relaxed now, I walked back to my rented apartment, opened the door, and stepped inside. As I was taking off my shoes and reaching to turn on the light, I heard some movement coming from the balcony. Clearly, something was there. The air seemed to freeze, and a terrible premonition flashed through my mind. I pricked up my ears and slowly moved my hand away from the light switch. Traveled carefully down the hallway toward the balcony. Through the curtains, I could see a human silhouette standing there. I was so afraid I didn't dare move. As I stared, I wondered how she had gotten in. Then it hit me the apartment next door was empty. Anyone with moving experience knows that if a place isn't managed by a professional property company, rental units are often left unlocked, or the key is hidden near the water heater or water meter. The woman had probably broken into the empty unit next door first, then climbed over from its balcony to mine. There was no other way. I had no choice but to call the police. I slowly backed out of the room without letting her notice, retreated into the hallway, and called the police. Then I waited in the corridor for the patrol car to arrive. Before long, I saw the police lights flashing silently as they pulled up. 2 officers came up to the 6th floor. After I explained the situation, the police decided that one would enter through the empty apartment and the other through my room to trap the strange woman on the balcony and arrest her. I had never really trusted the police before, but at that moment, she completely changed. The officers quickly carried out the plan. They rushed into the room, dashed toward the balcony, and pulled open the curtains, but there was no one there. They opened the balcony door to check, still no one on the balcony at all. I followed the police as we searched my apartment and the empty unit next door, 602, but we found no trace of the woman. The officers also explained the situation to the resident in 603 and checked inside, yet there was no sign of her there either. It was truly bizarre. Unless she had jumped, how could she have disappeared from this floor? At that point, I really wanted to know what had been going on with her standing in front of apartment 302 in the beginning. I explained the situation to the police and asked them to accompany me to visit 302. Because of the unusual circumstances, I also called the property agent to come over. The agent said that 302 was indeed occupied, and I rang the doorbell with them for a while, but no one answered. The real estate agent was about to use his spare key when he noticed the door was actually locked. It swung open with a single turn. The moment it did, a foul, unnatural stench poured out from inside. I won't describe the exact scene in the room, but the tenant had been dead for over a month. I was too terrified to step inside. More police officers arrived soon after, and I was called in for questioning as well. Since it was ruled a suicide, I was considered a suspect, but the person who had killed himself was a man, not a woman. So what on earth was that terrifying woman I had seen? Even now, I realize I never once got a clear look at her face. I moved out immediately after the incident and have never seen that woman again since. To this day, I still don't know who or what she was, but every time I step into an elevator, I think of her back. Because of that, I've developed a habit before the elevator reaches my floor, I close my eyes, so I won't see anything I was never meant to notice in the first place.